I think a lot of times engineers take things literally. And so they look at marketers who can make those kind of fluffy, creative decisions and think if they act like those marketers, they will make the same decisions. But that's not how it works.
Mm,
There's a
mm.
whole process behind it that you got to learn first. Marketing to engineers is very different. You have to be, again, very straightforward. And a lot of times you have to be honest, like engineers will smell BS. If you focus, engineers understand facts. Am I presenting a technically accurate content? That's your basis. That's what you could start with. And you don't have to be fluffy or creative or, whatever. Just start with facts, correlate with the engineers to make sure your facts are accurate. And for engineers, stick with facts, stay simple, stay clean. Don't try and do these big fancy things,
Yeah.
right? That you see big fancy marketing people do. At first, get some experience and stay simple, stay clean, stay with the facts. The solver is harder to develop and validate because the solver actually has to be validated against experimental data. The front end doesn't. The front end just has to be good, user-friendly workflow. And yes, you have to validate it against customers and make sure customers like the workflow, but that's it. The solver has to actually represent a physical reality in a computer. And that's much harder. The one thing I would look at when evaluating like a new simulation tool is usability is important, yes, but the most important thing is the kernel, is the solver.
Mm.
How long has been around? How has it been validated on experimental tools? Because if somebody comes out and says, oh, we developed a new solver, it's been around for a year, it's done, you just haven't had the time to validate it on the data. It's not physically possible. The design team thought it would be really cool to name each release of Apex like a different animal.
It's funny actually.
Okay.
I went to the zoo with my son a few years ago,
And you're
and
like, oh, this is all releases of
we,
Apex.
we we had a competition. I said to my son, and his cousin was with us as well. And can you name an animal in alphabetical order? And they were struggling: antelope and bear and cow, whatever. And I just reeled off, bang, 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 all these animals. They were like, whoa.
Sounds fun. Sounds
Yeah,
like
yeah,
we're
yeah,
being creative, we're being marketers. Like, how hard does that look, right?
yeah.
The problem is the basic rules of marketing will tell you whenever you're trying to brand something, you're now using completely different words, even though they're animals, but now you're relying on another human knowing what all the apex predators are, making the connection between apex predators and your Arctic wolf or fox, remembering that it's Arctic
Yeah.
wolf and not an Arctic fox, right?
Wow.
So like there's multiple associations have to be made in somebody's brain in order to get to the fact like, it's the next release of Apex.
Masha Petrova is CEO at Nullspace Inc, a company specialising in simulation software for electromagnetic applications. Masha gained a PhD in aerospace engineering from UC San Diego and has held C-suite positions at established and startup simulation software companies, including MSC Software, Ansys, Onscale and Altium. Masha's passion for brand and marketing around simulation software shines through, and her wealth of experience is a true asset. In our conversation, we discussed the importance of solver technology in simulation software, the pitfalls of letting engineers loose on a software marketing strategy, and with a subject very close to my heart, the early product positioning and marketing of MSC Apex.
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. Cool. Great, Masha. Good. Lovely to see you today.
Great to see you again.
Evening for me and morning for you. So you're based in Southern California,
I am
I
in Southern
believe.
California. I moved to Orange County from San Diego for MSC Software way back when.
Okay, so Orange County is suburb of Los Angeles-ish. How would you?
No, we're not a suburb
No.
of Los
Okay.
Angeles.
Okay.
Okay, Orange County
Apologies.
is Orange County.
Okay. Okay. But
It's
you,
funny. Everybody is like, "Oh, you're in LA." No, we're very picky about Orange County. It's
I see.
not
I see. Okay.
LA, but
Apologies. Apologies.
no, just kidding. I'm from Russia. I mean, honestly, like all of America is like
Yeah.
one big blow, right?
Yeah.
So we're right an hour away from in between San Diego and Los Angeles. So an
Okay.
hour from San Diego, an hour from LA.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Okay. And I'm in the northwest of the UK, which is quite different, I think, to Southern California. But we're pros and cons in terms of where we both live, you know. So fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Okay.
But
So
we originally met in Orange County 7 years ago,
we
right?
did. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So I just wondered, probably best in your own words, if you could give a little bit of background to what you do, what you do currently, what you've been doing throughout your career, and how things have developed to what you're doing at the moment. And is that something
Yeah.
you can?
Thanks. Thank you. Yes, for sure. So, my background is I'm an engineer by training. My undergrad was in mechanical and PhD was in aerospace, and my PhD is from UC San Diego, and I actually did numerical analysis for my PhD work. So it was numerical research, simulation. So simulation, my foray into simulation started in grad school. And then right out of grad school, I went to work for a small startup in San Diego that was a simulation company modeling chemically reactive flows. It was a small little company that later got acquired by Ansys, called Reaction Design. And I was a real engineer at Reaction Design for exactly a year until I realized that I was way too extroverted to stay as an engineer. And so the salespeople would always come to me with questions, and this then started taking me on customer calls, and I loved visiting customers and understanding their problems and talking to them. And so I became sort of this like liaison between marketing, sales, and engineers and development. And after that, kind of went onto the marketing and biz dev path, and have been in engineering software companies like Ansys, MSC, obviously, where I started my career as head of marketing, Altium as VP of brand for a few years, and then a bunch of startups that Ansys acquired. And now I'm a CEO and co-founder of another simulation company in the same
Yeah.
electromagnetics called Nullspace.
Okay. Okay. So could you just give us a little bit of a background on Nullspace then? So how's that come about as a company, and your role working with them?
Yeah, so Nullspace develops simulation software for electromagnetics. So engineers designing antennas, radars, who need to simulate electromagnetic phenomena in order to see how their RF device, radio frequency device, performs, use our software. And the unique thing about Nullspace is that we are much faster than any of the commercially available incumbent tools. So tools from Ansys or Dassault systems, for example, for electrically large simulations. So these are simulations that typically takes days, weeks. We've even heard of over a month, simulation running over a month, which I know you're familiar with on the probably CFD and like solid dynamics side of things. But on the electromagnetic side, you run into the same thing. And the issue is that the solvers for those incumbent tools have been developed over 30 years ago and remained virtually unchanged, which in some cases, like, for Nastran, that works. But at the same time, there's lots of opportunity for new solvers to come in based on the modern computing architecture that could run on the cloud, that could take advantage of parallel computing, right? And so that's what Nullspace does. So we're a relatively new solver. We're a modern solver, where the solver itself is just over 10 years old, that has been validated and developed at a defense contractor out of Huntsville, Alabama, and used on actual real hardware, RF hardware that was designed and developed for the military. And then Nullspace solvers were used to actually design that hardware and those RF technologies. And then last year, my co-founders wanted to spin it out of the defense contractor, and they brought me on board as a CEO. They wanted someone with marketing background who understands simulation, which is kind of a hard thing to find. And I wanted to run a company that was simulation software company, which is also kind of hard to find. So somehow, by the miracle of the universe, we found each other, and that's been over a year now. And so Nullspace was born.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So something that sprung to mind then. So if you're talking about solver technology and solutions that are taking weeks or even months to solve, are you, in terms of the algorithm development, the numerical algorithms that are developed, are they based on finite element methods, or have are new methods themselves being developed?
Great question. And I
Yeah.
love it that you have this podcast, this top simulation where I can actually talk about what solvers we use.
Okay.
You're very unique in that. So that's great to have this platform. So our solver is based on method of moments, not finite element. So it's a
Okay.
method of moment solver. It's GPU and CPU accelerated. And we have a proprietary compression algorithm that my co-founder and CTO and his engineering team wrote that basically the way it compresses the matrix, that the linear algebra equations and the matrix
Yeah.
is, let me see if I don't screw it up. It's a dynamic way of compressing the matrix so that
Okay.
it's more modern approach, which makes it much faster.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But the trick is much faster without the loss of accuracy, because a lot of times you speed something up, you're losing accuracy, right? In simulation. So the whole goal of Nullspace was to either become more accurate or at least keep the accuracy of the incumbent solvers as at the same time greatly speeding up the simulation. So there's, again, validation over the last 12 years or so of the solvers included constantly checking for accuracy, constantly checking against those incumbent solvers
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
make
Okay.
the
Okay.
accuracy not lost.
And how does that compare with the legacy tools that people use? Is it a completely different numerical approach then for solving these
It's not
equations?
completely different. So for example, Altair has a tool called FICO that is a simulation solver also based on method of moments, but it's also something like 30 years old or older than that, the solver itself.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's a method of moments solver as well. That's not novel. There are tools that use compression algorithms, so that's not necessarily novel. Like the idea of using a compression algorithm is just the way we wrote ours and the way it's implemented. That's what's proprietary and unique. And also we don't pay gate our CPUs and GPUs. So once you buy a license, you have access to whatever CPUs and GPUs you have on your machine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also we have a philosophy, because so there's 3 of us co-founders, we're all PhD engineers. We don't like to torture engineers. We like to preserve engineering workflows. And so all of our seats are floating, our licenses are floating. We don't do node-lock licenses. And so the company philosophy is just to respect the engineering workflow and make it as easy as possible while still making money, right? Like we still have to survive as easy as possible for engineers to implement our tools.
Yeah. Okay. And perhaps if we think about the analogy with an FEA workflow, is Nullspace a standalone platform that you can plug CAD into, run the
Yes.
numbers, and then pull the output?
Yeah, so we have 3 products, actually, 3 software tools, should say. One's called Nullspace Prep, which is the meshing CAD tool, which you can import whatever CAD you need to. So if you've got
Yeah.
SolidWorks or CATIA or whatever it is, whatever your step files, you can import, and then the meshing has to be done in Nullspace Prep in order to use our simulation engine. And then once the meshing is done, then it goes into Nullspace EM, which stands for electromagnetics, and that's the actual solver. We have a post processor, so we have a pretty flexible Python API. So the way my CTO describes it is, the incumbent tools usually the user opens up the tool and then you can open the Python environment inside the tool, right? Whereas we do the reverse. You, as a user, you have your own Python environment, and then Nullspace opens up inside your Python environment. So it gives it a lot more flexibility to plug in other tools that have Python APIs into Nullspace, like optimizations and things like that. And so that's the 2 products. And the third one is called Nullspace ES, stands for Nullspace Electrostatics. And that's actually very unique, and there isn't a competitor, as far as we know, to that tool. And that allows you to simulate electrostatics. And that's important for ion traps. So ion traps are used as a technology for quantum computing. So we have a few prominent quantum computing companies that are using our software that allows you to very quickly simulate these huge, electrically large problems when developing ion traps for quantum computing.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so that's
I
pretty
know
cool.
I know what some of the words mean, but I don't necessarily. Yeah. Okay. And typically, so you mentioned antenna design. So who would be a typical customer of Nullspace then?
Yeah, so industries that utilize or design and develop their own antenna and radar applications. So obviously defense is a big example, right? So like phased arrays antennas, that's an electrically large problem. So where we shine really, Nullspace, and just to be transparent, right now we're not the most user-friendly, right? The focus was to develop a very powerful, very fast, very flexible solver. And that's what we have. Not necessarily the easiest to use in terms of like getting through the preprocessor part and getting to the simulation piece. So that's the next step, is to improve the usability. But defense is an obvious industry. So for electrically large problems, meaning the simulation takes you hours, days, weeks, sometimes over a month. And what industries have that application? Defense uses a lot of and that's typically antenna and radar problems, analysis and design. Aerospace, obviously, with all the satellites and things like that. Communications. So I think someone was mentioning Starlink, for example, uses like these phased arrays, right? The novel phased arrays that have been developed. We're not much in automotive yet, but I'm sure there's applications there that we could use as well. But right now, defense, aerospace, communications are the big areas.
Gotcha. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, you said something that piqued my interest there, and it links into what well, I wouldn't say the main thread, but some of the aspect that we're going to be talking about. So you talked there about UI and difficulty in workflow, people getting involved in technology and what have you. So hold that thought. But if we talk about where we first got to know each other, which was with MSC Software, would we say 6 or 7 years ago or so? Would you say?
Wait, can I tell a story? Well, okay, well, you finish your thought.
Well,
what
I was going to say was that you were involved with MSC at a time when Apex was starting to come out as a commercial product.
Yes.
Yes. And Apex is a key project that was trying to take a workflow, a Nastran workflow, or a sort of practical FEA workflow that historically, using legacy tools, was quite difficult for people to do. With long learning curves, take people a long time to get up to speed with tools to become productive. So Apex was the dream or the concept of Apex was to come in and make this workflow much more straightforward. So that's the thing that came to mind then when you were talking about potentially Nullspace perhaps not yet being the most fluid, easy to use user environment that people can come up with. So yeah, just wanted to mention that. So what you wanted to
our story. Well, so I just want to paint the picture for kind of context. First of all, how we know each other, because I think it's a cool story. And second of all, like the time that I was in MSC. So the way we met was I was hired as director of global marketing. So essentially it was a CMO role, because there was no CMO, there was no VP of marketing, but my title was director of marketing at the time. At a time where MSC was about to get sold to Hexagon, so that same year. And then it was 3 other acquisitions that happened that year of smaller companies that MSC acquired. It was my first corporate job, right? Like before that, I was running marketing and engineering and much smaller companies and startups, right? This was my first big global corporate job as head of marketing in this pretty crazy environment. And then I was handed multiple product lines that MSC has lots of tools, right? And I was supposed to be marketing all of them. I remember at one point in one quarter, I had it was something insane, like 12 marketing campaigns or 16 marketing campaigns, different ones on different products, launched and running at the same time, which involved success stories, webinars, sales enablement. I don't remember, like YouTube videos. There was so much that each campaign involved, and I was overseeing all of it as a brand new, head of marketing for a global company. So it was a lot. And the way I met you is I was handed this product, Apex, and told this is the new hot thing. We need to market it. And it's going to solve, at the time, it was positioned as it was going to bridge the gap between designers and analysts, right? So people doing simulations, so these PhD level engineers, which is what Nullspace currently addresses, who are used to very hardcore, obviously, simulation tools. They understand theory. They're not afraid of coding stuff, right? and designers who are used to SolidWorks.
Yeah.
And Apex, when it was going to address this whole gamut of people, because obviously that opens up a much bigger market. And so I was told, market it, except at the time there was a very small pool of customers for Apex. But you were one of the biggest champions for Apex, and you were my first success story, because I was like, crap, the first thing salespeople wanted, they wanted success stories, right? Or can I say, sorry, I said a bad word. Just be careful. But crud, I need success stories. So salespeople came to me and said, we need success stories, customer success stories. Well, where do we get it? And you came along and you actually gave us our first, I think, customer success story for Apex.
Okay.
And I remember like putting it together and interviewing you and writing it. And that kind of you helped launch my marketing career. So
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah. Well,
yeah, and you were right. The one of the cool things about Apex, because I remember I was trying to understand as much as possible about this new product. And so I would go and sit in development meetings and listen to developers talk about it. One of the very cutting edge things about it was the user interface, right? Because it was trying to capture the designer market. You cannot capture the designer market unless you have very easy workflow, right? Like you cannot be coding stuff.
Yeah.
Very nice, beautiful. And that's what I remember Apex had. I remember at the time they were putting in, I don't know if they still have it, but like those bubbles, like help bubbles that would kind of like tell you what the different
Yeah.
that was cutting edge technology at the time.
Yeah. I mean, there are many aspects of Apex that, I often have to remind myself how painful the legacy or the incumbent tools were that we were using for FEA. Obviously, there's a number of third-party tools that I can't really mention. People know what the main tools are for supporting an Astron, or just supporting production level FEA in an aerospace development environment. But yeah, all of those things, the embedded help videos and the step-by-step instruction, the beautiful UI, if you like, and the functionality that sits beneath all of that, are key to everything that's been happening. So I mean, I remember at the time people were obviously excited about this technology, but the marketing of it, I think, was somewhat difficult, because we were perhaps going for too many user demographics or too many user types. You mentioned the designer. I mean, sometimes I find it difficult to split analyst and designer into two separate camps, because it's a very fuzzy thing. But some people were pushing Apex towards people with very little FEA experience on one hand, and on the other hand, they were focused, like you say, on the very experienced analysts who really want to get down and into the numbers and the detail and what have you. So there's been a lot of change in terms of how things have developed, both in terms of the tool, but also in understanding where to position that tool in the marketplace. I mean, one I remember something somebody said to me when we were looking at a company who was very heavily ingrained in a legacy tool, a non-MSC tool, and I could see from 10 miles away the problems that they were having with it, and the time they were wasting, and the development issues that they were having. And somebody said to me, getting these guys to switch is going to be, it's going to be easier to ask them to switch religion than it is to get them to switch a tool set. And I always thought that was pretty interesting, where people are so focused and ingrained, and you can sort of espouse the benefits and the advantages all the way through, but if somebody knows a tool, it's very difficult to try and pull them away into something that's tricky, tricky for them to get to grips with.
Yeah, and I think, the important thing is maybe to paint for people. This is going to sound like commercial for Apex, right? But I think we got to distinguish between, there is the usability aspect of any simulation tool, which is the front end and the back end, right? Front end is usually pre-processing step, right? It could be combined with CAD, where you're creating your geometry, but also the meshing part. No one's been able to get away from meshing yet. And by the way, no one's been able to crack this, getting, creating a tool that addresses analyst, PhD level engineering analyst needs. And let's just say to roughly describe the persona, bachelor degree design engineers who are used to working with SolidWorks and CATIA and things like that, right? Obviously, there's a whole gamut and just like two extremes. No one's been able to crack it. There's other companies that have been trying to do it. Discovery Life has been trying to do it for over a decade as well. I would argue that they haven't been able to crack that yet either. And the question is why? And I think my time at MSC, that 1 year that I spent at MSC, trying to crack that code and trying to market Apex as such, like as a tool for that whole entire group of engineers, taught me a lot that I'm still applying to this day, right? So I think if we think about the two kind of roughly two aspects of any simulation tool. So there's the usability, front end, back end, which is the post-processing piece, if you have it. And then there's the solver, the thing that actually simulates whatever the physical phenomena is. So I think for Apex, it was as a mechanical solver, right? Or is there some CFD, or is it just
mechanical? Yeah.
Mechanical solver, right? And absolutely. I think for Apex, they did two things. They rewrote completely the user interface in the front end and the back end. And I remember they hired some very high-end people, designers to put that together. But also, I believe they rewrote the solver, right? Which was sort of loosely based on the Nastran solver, but that was rewritten as well. And I think, that's the challenge, is the solver is harder to develop and validate because the solver actually has to be validated against experimental data. The front end doesn't. The front end just has to be good, user-friendly workflow. And yes, you have to validate it against customers and make sure customers like the workflow, but that's it. The solver has to actually represent a physical reality in a computer. And that's much harder. And so that's why, when I came to Nullspace, one thing, actually before Nullspace, is because I've worked with other simulation startups as well. The one thing I would look at when evaluating like a new simulation tool is usability is important, yes, but the most important thing is the kernel, is the solver. How long has it been around? How has it been validated on experimental tools? Because if somebody comes out and says, oh, we developed a new solver, it's been around for a year, it's done. To me, that screams BS, because you just haven't had the time to validate it on the data. It's not physically possible. And so, whereas the front end, you can develop in a year and have an awesome user interface that works. That's actually doable, right? So I think looking at the two separate timescales of development for the solver kernel itself versus the back end, front end part, and how do you bring those two together? How do you successfully bring those two together? And you can't really do them all in the same time scale. I think that's a challenge.
Understood. I mean, one of the main things that's happened with an Apex workflow of late is it now relies on the core Nastran solver capability, either embedded within the Apex environment or pulling out to a remote or an external analysis as and when it needs to. That's a key aspect. And of course, you've mentioned defense and aerospace and communication, space operation, what have you. Those industries where there's human safety involved, that they are extremely cautious industries. Something as mission critical as a fighter jet. You could come up with a solver, that solves in 1% of the time, maybe compared with Nastran. But that's a big jump, a big risk for a company to switch over to something, So and again, I've spoken to a number of people on this channel on these topics, is that people want confidence in change. They want to be able to say, okay, these incremental changes that are happening, but we still fundamentally trust what's going on behind the scenes. So that's a key point you make there, that the solver is the important part, isn't it? Really,
right, and the Nastran solver has been relied on. This is not an MSC commercial.
No, of course.
But Nastran Solver has been relied on for so many years. People trust it, right? And I did always wonder when I was trying to market Apex, and I just thought maybe I was new to the field and didn't understand something, some secret. But I did always wonder, like, why are we rewriting the solver? Because I understood the front and the back end piece, rewriting that and making it more user friendly and putting all that money into front and the back end, for sure. But rewriting the solver, I mean, I understand that Nastran is made for, again, like PhD level analysts, and it's not made for designers. And so, but still, like, that just didn't make sense to me because I knew intuitively that just couldn't be done. And so I think it's really smart that MSC is pivoting, what you mentioned, Apex essentially, back and front end to, you know, it would have been easier to market if, let's say, it was called Patron 2.0 or something like that. People would know what Patron is, right? Every time you create a new name for a brand, you have to, that takes up brand equity. Like, you have to get that name, the word out there. You have to then associate the word with, in people's heads, with types of feelings in order to market it, right? So I remember, like, when marketing Apex, the design team thought it would be really cool to name each release of Apex like a different animal, like Apex Predator. I remember there was a are they still doing it? Is that still a
No,
thing?
they're not. No, I
Thank
it's
God.
funny actually.
Okay.
I went to the zoo with my son a few years ago,
And you're
and
like, oh, this is all releases of Apex.
we had a competition. I said to my son, and his cousin was with us as well, and they were probably, oh, this is maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I said to them, "Can you name an animal in alphabetical order?" And they were struggling: antelope and bear and cow, you know, whatever. And I just reeled off, bang, 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 all these animals. They were like, "Whoa!" You know,
All Apex Predators, right? The Arctic, was it Arctic Fox? Was that our first one? Was that
Arctic wolf,
Wolf? Okay.
black
Wolves.
marlin, cheetah,
Jeez.
diamond python, eagle,
I remember the diamond python.
otter, grizzly, Harris hawk.
Oh, you actually remember them all.
Yeah, I
Wow.
can't. They've gone. They've gone. They've gone.
Well, so here's, I know we're going to talk about marketing to engineers. This is a great example that validated kind of like my theory is that when engineers try and be marketers, they disregard some very basic rules of marketing that will screw you up. So doing that from engineering perspective, oh, like logically it makes sense. The product is called Apex. Let's call each release, let's be cute, right? And super creative. And we're going to call each release a different Apex Predator, right? Sounds fun. Sounds like we're being creative, we're being marketers. Like, how hard does that look, right? The problem is the basic rules of marketing will tell you whenever you're trying to brand something, you're now using completely different words, even though they're animals, but now you're relying on another human knowing what all the apex predators are, making the connection between apex predators and your Arctic wolf or fox, remembering that it's Arctic wolf and not an Arctic fox, right? And so, like, there's multiple associations have to be made in somebody's brain in order to get to the fact, like, it's the next release of Apex, and here's a new.
That's really interesting. I mean, a couple of years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, they went to the year. So Apex.
Oh, thank God.
2024.1.
Whoever made that decision,
it, you know?
Good job.
Okay,
Smart.
cool. Anyway, let's. Like you say, I don't want this to be an Apex Nastran commercial. I do enough of that as it is. Let's talk about something else. No,
right.
So you talked about marketing of a simulation product, you know, and you know, we have discussed this in the past. You know, looking at the marketing from an engineer's eyes versus a marketer's eyes, and again, it's probably, you know, you can't split them into two camps. You know, there is overlap and what have you. You know, so that said, what are some of the key things that the marketing of a simulation tool perhaps differs from a marketing of a consumer tool, and equally how the marketing changes when a marketer looks at it versus when an engineer looks at it? You know, so what are some of the things you might think about there with the experience you've had?
Yeah. So, you know, one thing that helps to think about it, when you think about commercial marketing, and, you know, there's just millions and millions of dollars that are poured into marketing teams of, let's say, a Coca-Cola product, right? Or even a new laptop, or anything like that. And marketing is very respected, and it's, sometimes more respected than the actual product development. And then you look at our world of engineering software, and let's just include all engineering software, so design tools as well. And that's absolutely not the case. Marketing is thought about as an afterthought, as a necessary evil. It gets budgets get cut first from marketing before anything else. And if you think about why that is, I think it's important to understand. So in the US, I just looked up the statistics. Only 5% of people who are employed, of the the workforce, are engineers and scientists. Sorry, engineers and scientists, 5%. Out of that 5%, if we're just taking PhD and master degrees engineers working with simulation tools, right? I don't even want to guess what that is, but probably smaller than 1%.
Yeah.
So you're dealing with a very small percent of population.
Yeah.
So like the whole throw spaghetti up on the wall and see what sticks, and like these crazy marketing campaigns don't work because you're a very small pocket of people that you're trying to work with, number one. Number two is you're relying on your salespeople. So sales always gets bigger budgets than marketing. Like there's a lot more dependency on your sales teams than on marketing. Marketing a lot of times is thought of as demand generation. Essentially, it's a demand generation job for sales.
Yeah.
Which it's not. Marketing is a lot more than demand generation, but in engineering software, it's typically is treated as such. And the reason is because your engineering teams are able to your sales teams are able to make person-to-person connection. They're able to reach out to that VP of engineering and have a personal connection with them, and then that VP of engineering might be making decisions about millions of dollars worth of software, and that's all you need. And so in that case, what do you need marketing for, right? And so over the last 20 years, leading marketing teams in those environments, I think I counted 7 companies at this point, or maybe even 8 with Nullspace. So startups and public companies as well. I've been trying to understand, like, okay, my role is to run a marketing team and an environment where marketing is seen as an afterthought, right? But I want to do a good job, obviously, and I think it's important. I think marketing can do a lot. How do you approach that? And so I've kind of put together some techniques that work really, really well. They haven't been implemented from what I've seen a whole lot. Ansys has been doing pretty good. I haven't followed MSC marketing much, but MSC is part of Hexagon. Hexagon has a much bigger marketing strategy, obviously, and it's not just software.
Yeah.
But Ansys really stepped up their marketing game in the last, I would say, 4 years or so. You could see there is just a lot more presence on social media. There is a lot more, and they're doing a pretty good job not offending engineers with their marketing. Like it's very cohesive marketing that engineers will find interesting, but is also getting traction, and that's hard to do. And so there's sort of 2 areas of people that usually go into marketing and engineering software. It's either engineers who have been forced, typically, sometimes want to, but typically have been forced to become marketers because we need to have some sort of marketing, so let's just shove someone in that role. Or marketers who really don't have an engineering degree, have marketed in other B2B spaces that are not engineering related, and now have to market to engineers. And those are 2 very different groups with different needs and different approaches that a lot of times don't work. So we talked about engineers trying to be marketers, trying to do things like, again, without basic knowledge of marketing principles, trying to do things that are, what they think is marketing, like naming software different animals without thinking about, there's a whole process of how you name something. It's not just like your favorite color or your favorite dog's name. Or I've heard of one company, public company I was at, there was a new software release coming out, and one of the executives with no marketing experience was insisting on calling it like some mountain, his favorite mountain somewhere in the Himalayas where he hiked, with no regard of like, let's Google it and see what else is associated with it. I've had instances where someone named a product. This was before I wasn't in charge of it. I just came into it. Somebody already named a product something. It was an engineering team because the marketing wasn't present. There was no brand marketing. Didn't do basic Googling. And the name was something that was very prominently used in the adult entertainment industry. And so if you Google it, it was the adult entertainment industry stuff that would come up.
Yeah.
There's some really basic things that you have to consider before you name your product something cute. And that's the engineering side of things. And of course, marketers who don't understand engineering, trying to market engineering software, it just lands flat. You get all kinds of things that engineers hate, and that's how you come up with engineers think marketers are idiots. Marketers think engineers don't know what they're doing.
I mean, one thing you've hit the nail on the head there when you talked about a company where there's a key contact or somebody who's making a decision for software usage. You might have hundreds of engineers who all have their own preferences, who may have all seen the pros and cons of different tools, either from current marketing or from stuff they've used in the past. But those decisions are not made by the users. Often, is often the case. It'll be some purchasing decision, that's financial implication, integration into PLM, CAD, accessibility. There's so many different factors that can influence those decisions, aren't they? And we've talked about industries being cautious in terms of the solver technologies and the ultimate impact that they will have on the industries that they occupy. Those decisions are often very safe decisions, aren't they, that people make? You're not going to get a company just ditching one tool set for something else across the board. There has to be some gradual transition for people to do these things, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly. And I think when engineers become marketers, whether they're forced to or they decide to go into that role without not being humble and not accepting that this is a different set of skills that I need to learn. There's people go to school for this. There's years of, a marketer that someone who's really good at marketing and can look at a color and go, no, that's not going to work. Like, what's a good example? I don't have a good example from pop culture, but you know what I mean? Like, oh, like that's not going to work. To get to that point where you can say that, it's not based on their preference. It's based on years of experience of knowing what works for the audience.
Yeah.
And when they like look at something and go, that's not going to work, like change it, change the color, change the font. It's based on years of experience. A lot of times engineers go in and they look at what they see and they're like, I can do that. That color I don't like. That's not going to work. Let's call it Arctic Fox. I'm going to keep getting out Arctic. I don't like the name, or let's pick a name of my favorite mountain because that's what I like. Well, that's based on your preference with zero knowledge of the preference of the big pool of people that you're actually trying to reach.
Yeah.
You see the difference? And so I think a lot of times engineers take things literally. And so they look at marketers who can make those kind of fluffy, creative decisions and think if they act like those marketers, they will make the same decisions. But that's not how it works. There's a whole process behind it that you got to learn first. And I think for marketers coming in, trying to apply marketing techniques that work for the masses or that even work for, let's say, B2B space, but let's say enterprise sales software or CRM, right? Tools or something like that. Marketing to engineers is very different. You have to be, again, very straightforward. And a lot of times you have to be honest, like engineers will smell BS more often than not. So I think to me, the what I found works, and the tip I have, whether you're a marketer, marketing to engineers, or an engineer who's become a marketer, is the common ground you have is facts. If you focus, engineers understand facts. And as a marketer, I mean, unless something's seriously wrong, like if you just focus on, am I presenting a technically accurate content? That's your basis. That's what you could start with. And you don't have to be fluffy or creative or, whatever. Just start with facts. As a marketer, apply your best marketing practices, but do not change the facts around on engineers, constantly correlate with the engineers to make sure your facts are accurate. And for engineers, stick with facts, stay simple, stay clean. Don't try and do these big fancy branding things, right? That you see big fancy marketing people do. At first, get some experience and stay simple, stay clean, stay with the facts. And learn basic principles of marketing first. Hopefully that makes sense.
It does. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've toyed with lots of different things myself, you know, and I'm definitely not a marketer. You know, I think I have a creative eye for things and can recognize when things look wrong, you know. But it is difficult, isn't it? You know, and I rely very heavily on looking at, you know, click throughs and you know, success of different approaches to try and hone what I'm doing, you know. And equally, you know, you can spend, you know, I've well, I wouldn't say fallen foul of this myself, but I've you know, built whole campaigns around video demos and what have you that have had less traction than two slides of a PowerPoint, you know. So it is tricky, and it's, you know, yeah. I mean, what you say about about having a fact-based approach is at least this sort of starting point, isn't it? You know, with people
Yeah.
can go from.
Yeah. But also, you know, I think you have to remember, first of all, for you, you're unique because you're highly technical, but you also have your own company, so you have to market for yourself, and you've been doing it for years. So you've been testing things. You will get smacked in the head. Your business will get affected if you don't market properly, right? So you will be first to learn.
Yeah.
Where I find that in a larger companies, a lot of times engineer slash turn marketer could get away with breaking a lot of things before sort of anybody notices or pays attention. And also another thing I think that's important to note is that marketing is a set of experiments. You're still conducting experiments. I think the expectation sometimes is set so high for marketing and marketing campaigns that everything marketing does has to work. And if it doesn't work, then they suck, right? That's not true. You're experimenting just like engineers are experimenting with, you know, you don't expect an engineer to design something that works right the very first time. You expect an engineer to follow good engineering principles, right? And do their best to come up with a design that works. And as long as they can show, like, look, we followed all the right principles, you can fail many times before you come up with a good design. You can redesign a whole bunch of times, right? Why? But the same standards are not applied to marketing. With marketing, it's like, well, if it doesn't work, then marketing sucks. You kind of have to like understand that that's also a set of experiments, as long as the marketing department and whoever is your head of marketing is following good marketing practices. It's harder because those are much fluffier. They're not, you know, straightforward equations that you could look up. You know, there's no governance.
That is it. That's an interesting point, isn't it? That, you know, that there aren't algorithms or numerics that you can run to say this approach is going to work the way you could perhaps say this aircraft wing is going to work. You know, it's different altogether, isn't it? You know.
Yeah, it's harder. And so I think that's why a lot of times marketing defaults to just being lead generation in our space, in engineering software space, because that's something engineers understand and can measure. And a lot of times, you know, executive C-suite in engineering software companies are also engineers. So they look at marketing from the engineering lens. And so, you know, you can see lead generation will give you numbers right away. It will tell you, like, if your webinar had 50 attendees versus 100, you could tell the difference, right? You could look at how many clicks you got. You could look at how many people opened your email. But that's all demand generation, lead generation. That's not branding. That's not storytelling, because how the heck do you measure storytelling? And by the way, it might take time to actually become sticky in people's minds. There's a lag that marketing has that sales, for example, doesn't have. That, you know, it takes time to build something out. And so in order for marketing to really flourish, number one, you have to have the right people in place that understand marketing and understand engineering. And number two is you got to give them the budget and the freedom to actually experiment and to create things. My best example of where I was really lucky to actually be able to do that successfully was, so at MSC, you know, running, I think it was actually 16 marketing campaigns for different products in one quarter that I was running. That gave me like an overview of how to market like a crazy diversity of products to engineers, and that it was exciting and interesting. But my best experience of where I was allowed to have the freedom to experiment and do something really cool was Altium. So when I was a VP of brand marketing at Altium, Altium is designs, or now they're being acquired, but they are a developer of design software for printed circuit boards, right? And so not a lot of people knew who they were. Engineers knew typically about like some of the competitor tools from larger companies. And Altium was sort of like, they were trying to get their brand out there. And so I was brought in as VP of brand marketing, which is like unheard of in our space, in engineering software space. And I was actually given a budget and the freedom to do some cool things. And we created this series of YouTube videos at the time that were called Altium Stories. They were based completely on our customers. They were not testimonials. We did things like doing product placement, which is not done in engineering software. So product placement is a type of marketing technique where the product just sits in the background, right? In like a movie or something that's right, that the commercial, or not commercial, but like a movie or a series that's watched a lot, but no one actually talks about it. It's just constantly used, or it's constantly in the background. So we did so we played around with product placement where the Altium software was in the background, and you could clearly tell because the interface was uniquely Altium, you couldn't confuse it with any other tool. But the Altium user was talking about something completely different. They were talking about their own product, which was, a satellite, or we had like a hacker, a world famous hacker that we interviewed. We had a team that developed, what's it called? The BattleBots, like one of the BattleBots teams. And they talked about their story and their product, didn't say anything about simulation. And like that was a series of videos that did so well.
Wow.
So our YouTube channel for Altium Stories, and now, by the way, if you look it up, it's completely different, and it's kind of a mess now, so don't look at it anymore. But back when I was there, this was 3 years ago or something along those lines, the YouTube channel for Altium Stories grew in a year, and I think we had like 20,000 subscribers or something crazy like that, to the size and surpassed the size of Altium YouTube channel, official YouTube channel, which was the separate YouTube channel that's been around for 20 years. So in 1 year, we got the same number of subscribers with Altium Stories as we did with the official Altium channel that's been around with their technical videos and testimonials and whatnot. 20 years. Right. So that was probably like one, and the reason why we were able to do that is because I was given the budget and I was given the freedom, and the executive team kind of left me alone to do what I wanted to do with my team, to build that. And that could have really just blown up if I stayed around.
You've got me thinking now. Product placement. Where could you place an Apex user interface? In the background of a film or something. Who knows?
Yeah, we've actually talked about, so for that video series, we didn't just use an in-house videographer. We actually hired a filmmaker who's had films on Amazon, and he did documentaries. So he specialized in documentaries. So he knew how to tell a story. It wasn't just show up with a camera. And we actually talked about doing a movie for like South by Southwest, which is a big big conference for creatives and tech that happens in where is it? Austin, I think, somewhere in, I believe. So it's huge, right? And it's not just for engineers. It's technology meets creatives. And they have a film, like a film category for award series where you could submit your film to actually be part of their award category. And so we talked about doing a film on like PCBs and why PCBs are important, printed circuit boards, why printed circuit boards are important for everyday life, and like actually putting a creative spin on it. There would have been no mention of Altium, except at the end, it would have said sponsored by Altium. And that would have been awesome. But, I left at that point.
You could have won an Oscar.
Yeah, and I imagine like the brand marketing, and you can actually see, so Autodesk is trying to do something like that. I don't know if you've heard or not, but Autodesk is a lot more, a lot less simulation, obviously a lot more design tools. And they hired, I believe maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, they hired a former CMO, Chief Marketing Officer from Peloton. And Peloton, if you know, is that bicycle, remember, like it blew up and had like insane marketing traction and behind it. So that's who they hired as their chief marketing officer. Now, I have my own opinions about that and whether that's going to work or not. She has no engineering experience whatsoever, but she was extremely connected. I mean, she knew personally Ryan Reynolds. And so they had a big commercial that was kind of like that product placement type film at the Oscars, for example.
Yeah.
Right, which is that's all brand, because there's probably no engineers at the Oscars, probably no engineers. So that's still, there's questions about like, is that going to be effective or not? But that's like a whole different other extreme where you bring in a chief marketing officer from a completely consumer oriented space.
Yeah.
Who will need a really big budget because they're used to really big budgets to do these big things.
But they're telling a story. They're telling a story, aren't they? To give people a feeling about that brand, ultimately, aren't they? That's the whole purpose of that, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said that I think the sweet spot is really in between an extreme like that and an extreme like engineering company that has zero marketers and it's engineers doing all the marketing. Marketing is like super technical videos and essentially manuals on how to use the software, like pages and pages of manuals, because you see that a lot, right? And like their marketing materials, you look at it and it's just overwhelming text and ugly colors and it's just offensive. Just looking at it is offensive, So I think there is a big spectrum of where the really effective spot for marketing and engineering software tool is, and that's somewhere in the middle, in my opinion.
Yeah. Maybe some zigzag in finding that.
Oh yeah. Again, it's experimenting. And I think people need to accept the fact that marketing is experimenting and there needs to be room to experiment, and the freedom and the safety. You need to have psychological safety in order to experiment. And if your marketing is always being pressured for results right away, and I want to measure things and I want to see how effective you are, you just default to lead generation, because that's the only thing that you can match without, some time.
Yeah. Fantastic. We've covered a lot of stuff there, Masha. Thank you.
We did.
We did. Is there anything else you wanted to mention or talk
I know
about?
we're at the top of the hour, right? Already.
It's okay.
I think it's been a blast to be here. I know that MSC, I don't think, has an electromagnetic solver, so we're looking for partners.
Okay. Well, I'm sure people can find you, Masha, if they want to discuss capability and all sorts of technical aspects and commercial aspects of what you're doing. So
our website is nullspaceinc.com, and then you can find me on LinkedIn, Masha Petrova.
Cool. No, it's really good to discuss the technical side, but also the branding and the marketing and how all that fits together. So yeah, useful. Hopefully people will learn something from what we've spoken about today.
For sure. And it's been so fun to reconnect with you again after all the years. You look younger, even younger. I don't know how it's possible.
I don't know about that. I don't feel younger.
Well, I can tell. So it's great to see you again after all these years, and great to hear you're still the champion for Apex.
Thank you, Masha. It's been great to talk to you.